to the Better Sex Podcast. My name is Deborah Catt, and I am your shameless host. This is the Better Sex Podcast, where we have unfiltered conversations about sex and relationships. This show is about the many different ways we do sex and have relationships. This show is for you if you want to have better sex on your terms. I truly believe that a sexy world creates a happier and safer world. If you want to do your part to create a sexy, safe world, please hit subscribe, comment, and like. Thank you so much. Today, we are going to dive into the world of, erectile dysfunction, as well as potentially non-monogamy. My guest today is Sequoia Stafford. She is an author, podcaster, educator, sex coach, and master healer. She weaves over 20 years of study, practice, teaching, and exploration of psychology, shamanism, mysticism, advanced tantric therapies, biohacking, full spectrum energy medicine, NLP, drama therapy, hypnosis, nutrition, and most importantly, her own discoveries of science of now to guide her seekers into being the healthiest human beings possible. Just like our fingerprints, each one of us has a unique design for what brings us and keeps us healthy, healed in the ecstasy of life. Her mission is to take pain and suffering out of love and sex. This year, she launched her podcast, Sex for Life, and she is the best-selling author of 2 books. It's Hard, Sexual Satisfaction Secrets to Beat Erectile Dysfunction, and I'm Not Jealous, the ethical, non-monogamous guide to free love, relationships without pain and suffering. In her California temple, she teaches applied tantra to singles and couples in her signature programs, Delicious Love and the Goddess Arts and Intimacy Academy. Sequoia's wish for her students is to find reverence in humanity in all of the moments of intimacy and the challenges that open doors to sacred partnership and love. I am so ridiculously excited to talk to Sequoia. She and I have known each other through the Tantra world for many years, and I am thrilled to have this opportunity to dive in and get your perspective. So welcome, Sequoia.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so delighted to have you. I know a little bit about your story, and I know that it's been quite a journey. So I'm really curious, how did you get here?
Oh my gosh. How did I get here? It is a long journey. Well, I was at the wedding of my godson, Austin, this last weekend, and his brother-in-law sat by me, and he's also dabbling in some shamanism, and he sat next to me and he asked me the same question. So how did you get to this place? And, tell me a little bit about you. My grandfather was Native American, and I grew up as his little Indian princess, is what he called me. And I have a brother and sister who really are not in into shamanism, or they appreciate our roots, but they haven't gone into it as a life choice. But ever since I was a little girl, I was searching for the modalities of Native American healing to understand the people who I am, who are my ancestors. Now, I'm also English, so I'm both sides of the coin, and I fully feel responsible for, what my English ancestors did to my Native American ancestors, which I do my best to try to uphold the knowledge of the people who no longer speak their native tongue in the world and whose healing arts have really been scrubbed from society. And because I had that as a childhood passion to understand, the people that led to my life, my grandfather's ancestors, I've always been a seeker of the connections that nature can bring us health. And so unfortunately, I was married and divorced from my only husband, the father of my daughter. And that relationship was very heartbreaking to me because I'm deeply passionate about family and community, and come from a mother and father who are still married, and our family was always very supportive of each other. We did everything together until I went off to college and created my own life, but we still are very closely connected. So when I was creating my family, I wanted to have the same kind of experience my parents had. I talk a lot about this in both of my books, but specifically my second book, because it's on non-monogamy. And one of the chapters is me, a non-monogamist. That's not how I started out. And I would say that, the truth of the matter is that I really love partnership, and I love the family that partnership can create. But when my divorce happened, I went on a more tenacious exploration of how I got to this place, how I made a bad choice partnership wise, and how to heal from the psychological, spiritual wounds of that relationship. And so I got here because I was wounded relationship wise and very sad to have a broken home to raise my daughter in. And with everything that I do, my passion has me do a deep dive into it. So I was already, before my divorce, studying shamanism. I was studying the ancestral nutrition through Weston A. Price, which his nutrition work has been a passion of mine for 20 years. So I was already working in the space of transformation coaching, even before I met my husband, before my daughter was born. And I have been a leader in all of those different communities that I have been a part of. I used to own an eco-friendly toy store and art studio. I was on the board of an urban forestry organization in Silicon Valley. I have always led the charge to create sustainable life choices for community. And that comes directly from being raised by two people who are active leaders in their community as well. So I saw it growing up, and I couldn't help myself but to be a part of any movement to bring people to healthy choices. The other aspect of how I got here would also include that after I had my daughter, I lost a baby to miscarriage and found out that I had Lyme disease, that I had been fighting chronic pain for about 10 years at that point. Maybe it was a little bit less than 10 years. And I just could never figure out what it was. And so through my healing journey, I started and I realized that Western medicine was not solving this problem. All they wanted to do was put me on opioids. And, I knew that I couldn't do that. Number one, I was allergic to them, but also I knew it wasn't sustainable, nor did I like the sensation of being on pharmaceutical painkillers. So while I was dealing with Lyme disease over those 10, 12 years, eventually I got healed from it. I realized that the solution to the chronic pain was doing a daily walking meditation, because no substance was going to take the pain away. I needed to find out what was at the root cause of the pain. And once I found that, it took time for my body to correct and heal itself. And so I am both a spiritual healer, a physical healer, and a psychological healer because of everything that I've gone through. And that's what is called a wounded healer archetype. So I've had so many things that have happened to me that I learned what it was like to be in that kind of pain. And I practiced on myself the healing modalities that I now work with in my clients. And that's the journey that I describe in my first book, It's Hard. It's hard to have chronic pain for 12 years. And at the beginning of that, I wanted to die. And at the end of it, I realized that that was the journey of my life that broke me into being a wounded healer that understands how powerful it is to not resist the lessons that Mother Nature is throwing at us. And we were talking earlier, the French saying, I don't know it in French, but translated, it's that which we resist persists. And I was resisting the pain, but once I embraced the pain and I was able to sit in the pain as my teacher, I was able to then learn my way to a healed place. And that's really who I am for all of the people who work with me, and men who are dealing with erectile dysfunction, women who are dealing with partners with erectile dysfunction. It's very painful. It's psychologically painful. It's relationship painful, causes a lot of problems on a relationship. Just my baby loss. I lost 4 babies, and that, amongst other things, contributed to the degeneration of my relationship. And it oftentimes does. So what I love about the work I do is I'm a mediator for partners to not give up on the commitment of partnership that they gave vows to, just because health challenges come up. And post-pandemic, we're all dealing with, shock from the fact that wellness problems can really bring down the entire world, not just a relationship, but some of the modalities that I use helps people to not have that happen. And that's a little bit about how I got here.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your willingness to stand, to tell your story from the place of the wounded healer. And one of the things I really liked about It's Hard, your book, is how raw and honest you are about your own story, and the way that you talk about dysfunction, erectile dysfunction. It just has such a nuanced and compassionate way to it, which I don't always find when we talk about men's issues. I often find when we talk about men's issues, it's like, this is all you have to do is some version of toughen up and, work out more. And so I really appreciated the flavor that you bring and just your perspective here. So
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I do. It's not easy to be vulnerable, but I ask all of the people who I meet and also relate with and who I work with as clients to be courageously vulnerable. There's gold at the end of that tunnel. And so I never ask anybody to do something that I'm not willing to do. And that's why I was so courageously vulnerable in that book. I really appreciate the acknowledgement.
Oh, I love that phrase, courageously vulnerable. And
Yep.
it's one of those things, I feel like I know what, or might know what that means, but I'm curious, like, can you say a little bit more about how you're using it and what that means for you?
Yes, absolutely. So courageous vulnerability is a way of being. And I say it that way because it's not something that you pretend to be. It's actually something that works best if you stand in what it's like for you as an individual. And I really customize my work with everyone I work with. So I never force my view of something on someone. I ask them to try it on like a jacket, right? So try on courageous vulnerability. And what does that mean for you? For one person I was talking to yesterday, it might be writing an email to their divorce attorney that lays out exactly what would work for them in this divorce proceedings, right? And to not be a nice person is courageously vulnerable for that person.
Mm.
Now, for another person, it might be standing naked in front of their partner for the first time with the lights on. Courageous vulnerability is whatever you know in your heart you can feel is uncomfortable and a challenge to do. But you know that on the other side of it, you're going to go to sleep at night being proud of yourself that you were that person who did that. For
Oh, I
me,
love that.
thank
I,
you.
hearing you say that, I just think it's like, I love the idea of the mantra being, or the thing in my head being like, did I do everything that I could do today to be the person that sleeps well, knowing that I stepped out just a little bit.
Yes. Yes. Most of us make decisions within our comfort zone and don't go out of our comfort zone. But the reality is that your growth and development as a human being happens outside of your comfort zone. So anytime I feel uncomfortable about something, I know there's growth for me there. There's something about that I am resisting or attached to. And I know from all of the work that I've done, the studies that I've done, and the practices that I've put in place, that if I am attached to something, then it's generally going to be ego based versus going towards what I would call the creator or nature, the universal good, the highest good. Ego choices for me are indicated when I feel attached to something and or I feel the desire to receive for the self alone. Now that statement, that term, the desire to receive for the self alone, I'll give credit to Michael Berg, who wrote a fantastic book called Becoming Like God. And it's about Kabbalah and the mystery schools of the Kabbalistic teachings, which is the mystery of Judaism. That's a great book. He talks a lot about going towards God, which I would call the creator, the highest good of the universe, or going towards ego, and how he gets people to understand ego is the desire to receive for the self alone. Anytime I feel that, or ego, or feel scarcity, like, oh, I don't feel like I have what other people have, I know that I'm in a thought process or going in a direction that is not for my highest good. I want to go towards the creation energy, the godlike energy, the universal good energy, or my highest good, the abundance energy. And so I always am looking at how that goes. And when I feel that I'm going towards scarcity or ego or desire to receive for the self alone, then I choose courageous vulnerability. I tell one on myself, and then I go towards the other direction because I know that I'm going to be able to sleep at night knowing that I like who I am. And who I am is someone who wants the highest good for all.
Hmm. As I'm sitting here listening and I hear basically it sounds to me like scarcity is the opposite of courageous vulnerability.
Yeah. Yes. Because one of the reasons why a lot of us are afraid to do things, say things, are because we're afraid we're going to lose something. See, I get into this a lot in my second book, I'm Not Jealous. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons for jealousy is people are afraid they're going to lose what they think is theirs. But one of the also themes of that book is that I believe that marriage and monogamy is going out of style because it was originally based on the ownership of women. And with gender fluidity and, sexual fluidity and also like relationship choices going towards designer relationships to me are, yes, we're married, but we choose to have intimacy in ways that is not conventional, right? I believe that people have the right to choose how to design their relationship. So when people are, the premise of that, my second book, I'm Not Jealous, when people are jealous, it's coming from a place of an old paradigm that marriage and monogamy was, all right, now your body, your calendar, your texts, your emotions, I own them and you own mine. And I can't, just go off and hang out with my guy friends because you own that time with me. And so, you have a right to be jealous of me if I'm doing things in secret, right? But I don't believe that relationships have to be ownership mentality relationships. I believe that, I have a right to my autonomy and my sovereignty, whether I choose to be in a contract of marriage or not, or a monogamous partnership. I believe in monogamous partnerships. I've had monogamous partnerships. I love monogamous partnerships. But I also know that having an old paradigm of ownership that is kind of sticky around monogamy and marriage has caused a lot of problems, a lot of jealousy, and people, they have a context anytime someone is partnered with them that they're not allowed to hug another person or show affection or emotional connection with another person because it's supposed to be reserved for that intimate relationship. I think that's at the heart of that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I love that you bring up this idea of like even hugging, because I think, what I've seen with people who are looking for something, more open than monogamy, but they're not always looking for, for sexual experiences or even, additional relationships. They're looking for can I freely, love my friends? Can I freely, can I freely, expand into this loving being that I am, and have it received and have it, create that cycle between us without it impinging on, on who I am with my primary.
Yes. I have a story for you. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. So the relationship of mine that I talk about in I'm Not Jealous that I had with my partner, John, he was getting used to the idea of having a non-monogamous relationship with me. We were dating, so we hadn't decided at that point that we were going to be exclusive. We had just met. It was within the first year, and he went to visit a friend of his. And now we were very close. In the book, you'll see later I asked him to marry me. We were, in a non-monogamous relationship, but this was pretty early on. He went to see a friend, a lady friend near where he lived. He lived in Southern California. I lived in Northern California. And he told me that he went there and he built her a cabinet. Now, I didn't have a problem that he went there. I didn't have a problem if he shared his magnificent lovemaking with her, because he's a god, and it's my belief that why should I be the only woman to experience the generosity of lovemaking that one of my lovers has? Like, I want other women to actually be treated the same way I've been treated. So I have a very high compersion rate, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But so John was with this lady friend, and he built her a cabinet. And I said to him, I laughed. I go, now, I'm not jealous of whether or not you kissed her, slept in the same bed with her, made love with her, but I am jealous that you made a cabinet for her.
Oh my God, I can totally relate to that. And I know.
And we laughed and laughed about it. And I said, because I am constantly observing myself and my emotions, I can actually have fun with them instead of like actually blindly reacting to them, right? So I noticed that I had this twinge when he said that he made her a cabinet. And we laughed. And I said, isn't that interesting that for men, like, he would have a problem with a man, going into my sacred space, my yoni, with his hands if he didn't trust the man. I was jealous of him taking the time to do a project like building a cabinet for her, and the care and creativity that he did with that. And still to this day, we're no longer together, but still to this day, we laugh about the fact that women and men are jealous in different ways. And that when you can see your jealous triggers and know what they're coming from, and I lay it out in that book, that it's coming from needs that you have as an individual that are your responsibility as an individual to get addressed. But some needs require another person to participate, like building a cabinet if you don't know how to build a cabinet, or, having the ability to surrender into a tantric healing session and having your yoni actually awaken to Rita. That's something that, oftentimes you need someone else to actually take you on that journey to experience. You can do it yourself, but these needs that generally trigger jealousy are when they're not getting addressed. And we have to have courageous vulnerability to ask for those needs to be met. Yeah. So John made me a cabinet to hold my bed. And because he knew how important it was my birthday present, and it was really sweet, and I loved it. And
it makes me wonder,
also,
it makes me wonder, would you say that acts of service are your love language?
So funny.
Because it makes me wonder if jealousy is more potent around our love languages, and our love language being directed in another direction.
Yeah. So love languages are super important. And sometimes it's hard for people to remember what the love languages are, or like to say, is mine that love language? I tend to be a shapeshifter in everything that I do. I mean, I was an actress and a fashion model back several years ago. And so I have a tendency to be a shapeshifter. And so the answer to your question, is my love language acts of service? I tend to have a lot of those love languages speak to me, because I'm a shapeshifter in so many areas. Like I tend to be a lot of different kinds of personalities based on the groups of people that I'm with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, acts of service are definitely high on my percentage. The way I talk about it is needs, because then it, instead of putting it on the other person to figure out what they're supposed to do right for me, it puts it on me to figure out what my needs are and how I'm going to courageous vulnerability wise, get those needs met. Am I going to have to ask my partner, I have a need to be significant, or I have a need for variety, or I have a need for certainty. Are you going to keep the appointment that you set with me? So I look at it as percentages versus only one love language.
Mm-hmm.
And I view the love languages through the lens of the needs. And I base the needs on the 7 chakras. I say that each chakra has a need, and every human being has those needs. We just have different priorities, like percentages of priorities. So, and then you can look into your family history and what you got your needs met in your family and your upbringing and what you didn't. So, for example, the cabinet thing, my father was a cabinet maker. He's an engineer. And when I was little, I would help my dad make cabinets and saw the wood and build fences. And I lived on a farm. So I like building cabinets are a fond memory of me
Mm-hmm.
and the father figure, the male that I loved first. So of course, my partner building cabinets would be nostalgic for me and be an expression of love, because my father is my hero and a bundle of love. So whether it's the act of service or, it's coming from my upbringing, I can see those things.
Mm-hmm.
Acts of service are huge for me because I also write in my books about what I find are 4 characteristics of a love leader, which is a term for people who work with me to be trained to be relationship and intimacy coaches. I have a program for that. It's called Love Leadership. So love leaders have integrity, authenticity, responsibility, and they're up to something bigger than themselves, which is service.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe very highly on all of us human beings in the world being love leaders with integrity, authenticity, generosity, and acts of service. And so, yes, service is very big for me, but touch and time together are huge for me.
Mm. I want to loop back for just a second because
Yeah.
you started to talk about chakras, and I'd like if you could tell us a little bit about what chakras are for anyone who may be
Sure.
listening who's not familiar.
Sure. Well, chakra in Sanskrit means disc or wheel. And so the chakra is the disc or the spiraling energy coming from, it's correlated with areas on the human body. There's also chakras in animal bodies as well. They're just placed a little bit different. But a chakra is a vortex of energy that correlates with bundles of nerves. So the way I see the chakra system, and through my research and study of the tantric yoga lineage, is that tantric yoga and all the branches of the yogic practice, that is where the chakra system comes from, is an ancient neuroscience. And that neuroscience communicated how to have a healthy mind, body, and spirit. So the psychology and the physiology and the energetic soul connection was put into an ancient philosophy, but also, what's the word I want to find? A technology. It's a very, very complicated technology that the West, a lot of people who might be listening to this might think of yoga as an athletic, thing you do at the gym. But in reality, there's branches of it that are the psychological side of tantric yoga. And tantric yoga is really the foundation of all yoga. So the psychological side, the physical side, and the spiritual side, and how they all weave together. And tantra means, very crudely translated, means to weave, or it means a loom, to weave together the psychological, physical, and spiritual well-being is to be a whole and complete human. And the ways they decided to help people in society back in ancient times was by having practices. And some of the practices include physical postures, but also breath practices, visualization practices. A lot of these very trendy yoga chakra pictures and symbols include sacred geometry, but those are visual reminders for the seeker when they see that to connect with the vibration of that energy. Like the heart chakra is green. The green color is also correlated with a specific vibration and a sound wave. And so when you meditate on the symbol, the green sacred geometry with Sanskrit symbol of the heart chakra, you become one with it, and therefore you tune your heart chakra to that. Now, chakras, the way I see the chakra also is like a view of life. So from my heart chakra, I see life a certain way. Through my root chakra, which is the first chakra, which starts at your tailbone and your legs, my experience of life through that root chakra is unique to me. So I see the chakras as also like an eye viewpoint. Like the sixth chakra, which is at your forehead between your eyes where the nose bridge is, that's seen as the third eye. It's also the chakra of imagination, illusion, and also visualizing and images in the brain. And the Egyptians called that chakra, the eye of Ra. That's where the seat of consciousness is. So the practices were to get us in tune with and grounded into being this hybrid of animal and spirit so that we could evolve and become the best human beings that we can be. And that's what I would say about the chakras. There's more I could say, but that's where I'll leave it.
Wow, that is, I really appreciate the idea of the view from the different chakras. And I know that in your books, you go deeper into practices,
Yeah,
especially practices of connection to your own body as well as your partners. And, I know you're an expert around erectile dysfunction, so that's something I really want to dive into. And I'm curious if you can, start by just telling us what is erectile dysfunction?
sure. Well, medical terms are funny to me because, we label people as having, these different illnesses or, medical terms. And, really someone somewhere decided that they were going to describe challenges with circulation in genitalia, erectile dysfunction, and sometimes you'll hear it described as ED. But it's not just a man's problem. Women can have erectile dysfunction as well. And a lot of people don't know that. So when I wrote It's Hard, Sexual Satisfaction Secrets to Beat ED, I did talk mainly about male erectile dysfunction. However, that book can be used for women as well. As a matter of fact, I, vulnerably share that I had erectile dysfunction. My genitalia didn't seem to work. I didn't even know that my body was supposed to have erections. But the reality is when I got trained in sexual healing modalities, and I learned that, not only do I not understand the anatomy of arousal of a man, I didn't understand the anatomy of arousal of my own body as a woman. And I even had some relationships with women. So when I learned all of this, I realized, okay, the term erectile dysfunction means that the tissue of the genitalia that is supposed to be erectile functioning is not working the way it's supposed to. Now, erectile dysfunction can be at the hands of the operator because the operator doesn't know how to stimulate the tissue to be erectile or to be erect. And that's generally the case with most women's challenges with erectile dysfunction in their own bodies. Most men and women don't know that a woman takes anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to get fully engorged. Now, women's genitalia responds to stimulus different than a man's genitalia. And a man's arousal is a completely different system. It's the opposite of what a woman's is. Now, yes, people can train themselves to have similar turn on to the opposite sex, and porn addiction and porn challenges with our current society is a major problem. So, taking that all into consideration, a woman's body requires an opposite kind of arousal than a man's. And the way I'll describe that is a man can have a thought or see an image and he can get erect. His what the penis, which we call in Tantra lingam, meaning wand of light. That's very important. So I'll come back to that. But the lingam can become instantaneously erect by him thinking of a sexual act or of a woman's yoni being sacred space in Sanskrit, also another word for pussy. For a man can just get erect by just the thought or the sight. A woman is definitely different. We take stimulus, we take being held in a safe space. We have to trust the person. We have to feel respected. We have to be courageously vulnerable to open our legs and to reveal the inside of our body. So that kind of erection takes a different kind of stimulus. And it's really important, and I teach this to, everyone, because I work with same-sex couples as well, but men, women, and people who identify non-binary. It's important for us to realize that if a woman's not enjoying sex, that if a woman is, not having an engorgement, an erection, and not having pleasure during sexuality, the foundation that I call the triad is trust, respect, and safety. She has to feel safe in order to open the inside of her body to be touched. And it doesn't feel good to be touched unless it starts to engorge because of the cardiovascular responses that include mucus and wetness. And the tissue, when it's flaccid on a woman, is it's sensitive to being touched unless it's lubricated, because our yonis can feel like a cut until it's lubricated. Well, lubrication comes from the engorgement, because with the flowing of the blood also ignites the mucous membranes to activate as well. So if a woman's not having sex because it's not fun, it's not comfortable, it's generally because the person is being entered or touched in a way that their body is not ready for. And it's the job of partners to find ways to enhance the arousal and engorgement of the female identifying partner. Now, men and women have the same tissue. It's just, one's concaved and one's, what's the other word?
Protruding.
Yeah, it's protruding, right? So the tissue of the female labia, the lips, that's the same tissue that on a man is the scrotum sac. They act very similarly, except for the scrotum sac has the testes that have dropped through it, and there's a seam there, which on women it's opened, right? So even when I've worked with people who are transitioning and getting sexual transition into either the male or the female, they're using that tissue to create the opposite genitalia than what they had. It's the same tissue. It's just with the hormones that the person got at birth, they either went towards the female open genitalia of the yoni and the vulva, or the protruding and closed scrotum sac of the masculine penis and scrotum, testes, and then the taint that is larger on men than it is on women. So it's the same thing. Now, as regards to erectile dysfunction in men, it's sometimes an early indication of cardiovascular disease. So if anybody is out there listening to this and concerned that you've been having erectile dysfunction, which means that your erection is not holding or it's not happening in times of arousal, you want to make sure that you're also checked out for any cardiovascular challenges or dis-ease. So with male erectile dysfunction, though, there can be an injury that happened. Like I worked with a man who was a cyclist for the majority of his life. And because he cycled and was hardcore, the seat that he sat on all the time basically damaged his nerves and his cardiovascularity in that area, in his pelvic floor. And then he had erectile dysfunction because of that injury. Now, people have had injuries of different kinds. Like, I remember a client injured his penis by having sex with his wife, and, they did a thrust, but he missed her introitus and, basically really broke up the tissue of his penis, and it went to the side, and that caused erectile dysfunction in him as well. So there's many reasons for erectile dysfunction, but I will also say that I find, and one of the reasons why I do wellness coaching as well as part of my work with people, it has a lot to do with lifestyle choices. Do you smoke? Do you drink too much? Do you have nutrition that is fast food, and you are eating things that are, degenerating your health, and it's showing up in your sexual functionality? If that's the case, a pill is not going to solve it. A pump is not going to solve it. You have to heal your wellness problems that were created by lifestyle choices in order to get your functionality back. Nature's really smart. When you watch nature, nature doesn't want to conceive an infant that's not going to be taken care of. So in my case, when I lost my 4 babies, I worked on my well-being, because if there's something going on with my well-being that's causing this, I don't want to just do IVF. And so I never did IVF. Now, that's because I'm really passionate about what I teach. And I knew that if Mother Nature was trying to tell me something, I did not want to supersede her. And I wanted to find out what was underlying what was going on. And so I went on a quest, and there's a lot of things that I learned about that, including the fact that I was chemical toxic. I was heavy metal toxic. I had a lot of problems that were from environmental toxins. Now, I'm a very healthy person, so I never would have expected to have lost 4 babies or to have had Lyme disease or all of those chronic pain problems. But to turn that around, I'm now 51 and in some of the best shape that I've ever been, because I took the time to heal what was underlining the sexual dysfunction that I had. See, for infertility problems is also in the classification of, erectile dysfunction. In my functionality of my reproductive organs were not working the way they were supposed to. So with men, if you are finding any symptoms that, I'm talking about, definitely want to get checked out by your doctor. Make sure that you don't have cardiovascular challenges, because it comes from what I've seen, about 2 to 3 years before, cardiovascular problems start happening. You start seeing a degeneration of your functionality as man. As erectile function of the penis. Now, the other thing that's happening right now is what I have been seeing is erectile dysfunction because of pornography. And that's something different. And that is that, every time we have an orgasm, we're anchoring whatever we were experiencing into our neurology. And if you're choosing to have sensual experiences with porn, which I don't have a problem with, but just like anything, there is moderation. If you are anchoring in your neurology that a certain type of pornography that is really extreme, because you've had to go to extreme porn because the gentle porn no longer works for you, it's going to show up when you have a live partner as erectile dysfunction, because you're not turned on by the person who's in front of you, because you've anchored this arousal to pornography into your nervous system, your neurology. And that's the challenge of some people who are really young. Like, we're seeing 20-year-olds who have erectile dysfunction.
Absolutely. The majority of people I'm seeing right now are in their 30s, and most of the men are having issues around pornography, around their erection. And one of the things that I believe is contributing, and I'm curious what you would say to this, is that there's this incredibly unreasonable bar around how big, how hard, how long your penis, your lingam is supposed to perform. And so, one of the things that I see a lot is it's like, for every erection you see on the screen, you have no idea what's actually causing it. It could be a pill. It could be, there are 15 people on stage, on screen, or, on the set to, make sure that erection is, prolific. And also it gets, they light it in a certain way. They shave them in a certain way. They're just, it's just fascinating to me. Anyway,
yes,
so I'm
totally
curious
agree.
how, if you see that.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that's the crazy thing about I mean, it's happening to women too. Like the more social media posts and these filters make everybody look perfect, then, you're walking around town and a woman's like walking towards you and she looks like she's, one of these wax, museum dolls walking down the street because she's made herself up to look good on social media, but in person, she's not a real human anymore, So the same thing is going on with men. They're seeing, men have always been, even privately wishing to have, the biggest cock, the best cock, the penis that's, the most sought after, that's media for you. My recommendation is get off media. Detox yourself from these kinds of programming that are not healthy. There's junk food and there's junk media. I think porn is junk media. I think social media can be junk media. Yes, it's the way a lot of people communicate, but really, it's not necessary. Men are obsessed with their penis and women are obsessed with their boobs and their faces and their hair. Men are obsessed with their biceps and their penises, and their cars. So the obsession around penis size and hardness of penis, I mean, some of the most amazing moments that I've ever had is with a soft on, and how beautiful it is when a soft on so gently caresses my clitoris. And that like energetically, there's like a zing that happens.
Hearing you say that makes me giggle.
I know, I heard it. I love it. But the other thing is like, think about nature. Nature made each and every one of us perfect in our incarnation for our life purpose. Let me say that again. Each and every one of us, no matter whether you're tall or short or, wide or thin or, blonde or brunette, dark skin or light skin, long penis, short penis, thick girth, thin girth, a woman's vulva. Mine just happens to be large, but I was supposed to have a 10-pound baby with a, gigantic cranium coming out of my body in 19 minutes. Like that surprised me. I didn't know my body was meant to do that. It's awesome. But I'm also 6 foot tall. I'm 6 foot tall, and that my body was designed to have a tall, large child of a 6'6" partner or something, right? I'm not a petite 4 foot, 90-pound person. The 90-pound person, is going to be partnered with someone whose lingam and erection fits them. And so I like to pay attention to nature. This is one of the reasons why shamanism is a big part of my work. Shamanism is healing modalities and views of healing through nature and spirituality, and seeing the patterns in nature and how we can understand being a hybrid animal spirit combination. So, the idea that any of us think our bodies are wrong is frankly sad. As a matter of fact, it comes from, I think, and this is one of my theories, is that a penis obsession comes from the fact that we're, cutting off the foreskin of boys when they're babies. That's a huge violation. Those babies have not given consent to to lose 4,000 nerve endings before they can raise their hand and say, yes, please cut off part of my penis. Boys they're not being asked that. Nobody's getting their consent. It is not medically necessary, never was. And Yes, there are certain traditions, and I totally honor and respect those traditions. If it is your spiritual or your family tradition, I understand totally. You are welcome to those traditions. I don't have a problem with your religious beliefs around any of that. My religious beliefs are based in shamanism and nature. And I believe that Mother Nature designed us to have a natural cleaning mechanism and a natural mucus mechanism to make sexuality function in a way that brings us pleasure to partner and to procreate. But we don't use our sexual organs for just procreation. The percentage of times when we use our sexual organs for procreation versus pleasure is way more on the pleasure side. It's very low percentages of using our sex organs for reproduction. But my problem with all of this is that around the world, and mainly in the United States, that's what I'm experienced with, we have sex ed, which is actually reproductive ed. So people are misunderstanding the sexual apparatus. And I think that erectile dysfunction is really people thinking that all there is pound, 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 penis, vagina, intercourse is sex. Well, I personally love sexuality as an entire body experience. My mind, my eyes, my mouth, my toes, my hands, my flesh, my hair, my imagination, my spirit. I see it in all of my books. I coined the acronym SEX as Sacred Experiences of Ecstasy, SEX. And so, you could want to have animalistic sex. That's totally fine. Have it. But to really create sacred partnership with another person and to make sure that that person is honored and respected and feels reverence to want to explore the creative sides of a sexual experience, you can't just have them be a skin bag where you're, getting off on their body. And that's what a lot of women feel when they're just being pounded and they're not being aroused and taken on a sexual journey.
So good. So I just want to take a deep breath here. We have covered so much in a very short period of time, and I feel like I could keep going. And that being said, I'm curious if there is one thing that you want somebody to understand or get from our time together, what might that be?
I would want people to get that sex is so much more than skin bags slapping together for friction release. And erectile dysfunction and jealousy that comes from people not getting their sexual needs met is happening because people think that intercourse is the only thing that is sex. Sex can include whatever turns you on, whether it's anal sex, whether it's oral sex, whether it's fantasy sex or, dom sub kind of interactions, BDSM, whatever it is, as long as you and the person that you are engaging in these sexual experiences with are giving consent, it's really between the two of you. So it is my belief and my theory that erectile dysfunction for men or women is only a thing because we think, or we've been programmed to think, that intercourse is the only way to have a sexual experience. And that's just not true. And once you learn that there's so many more things you can do, that erection will come back in its own time. And sometimes it needs some slow medicine to reverse however you got there. And it sometimes is, reaching out to someone like myself who can show you those things, because a lot of people, like my daughter, took me to the gym yesterday and she was like, Mom, will you come with me to the weights? Because I kind of feel a little bit embarrassed to go into a weight room when everybody is there staring at me. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So we went and we did weights together. And when we didn't know what to do with a certain thing, we talked to each other and we kind of like looked it over and we tried it out. And then we got more comfortable and now we can go by ourselves. The same is true with like a sexual experience. You and your partner agree before you get clothes undressed to kind of talk about what kinds of things you're curious of doing, but you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable because it's outside of your comfort zone, but you want to be courageously vulnerable, because Sequoia said courageous vulnerability is where growth is. You sit with whether it's sparkling water is your thing or a glass of wine or whatever is your thing, sit outside of the bedroom and talk about what you would want to try out. And if you want help with that, there's people like myself, people like Kat, who teach these different kinds of sexual explorations. And it's safe and it's fun. And it is a real good opportunity to, be guided into what I call the abyss, those areas on the hero's journey that you're afraid of going by yourself. It's totally normal. There's lots of people who you could reach out to, and there's wonderful opportunities for growth sexually in a relationship that maybe has become a friendship, but that you still care about each other. And that's something I find a lot. So reach out to someone and know that intercourse is not the only way to have a fantastic sexual experience.
I love that. And I especially love what you were saying about, expanding in my words, expanding the menu of what sex is.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Sequoia. This has been really an amazing conversation. You can find out more about Sequoia. She has an amazing podcast called Sex for Life. She is also the best-selling author of 2 books. It's Hard, Sexual Satisfaction Secrets to Beat Erectile Dysfunction. Bit of a mouthful, but there you have it. We'll start with It's Hard. And I'm Not Jealous, the ethical non-monogamous guide to free love relationships without pain and suffering. I am so grateful that you've come to join us today here at the Better Sex Podcast. And please follow her on social media. There are links to find her all over the place down in the show notes. And speaking of show notes, please follow us, the Better Sex Podcast. Subscribe, like, and comment so that we can spread better sex throughout the world and create a happier and safer world. Until next time, my name is Deborah Catt, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's fun.